What do I envision balance to be? How do you balance champs? So I'm not on the balance team, so I don't really have control over exactly how we balance things, but my personal take on balance is that balance is a combination of statistics and perception. There's certain like types of like power that we just shouldn't let in the game. So this is like if your character is 58% win rate, that's probably just not okay. Doesn't matter how people feel about it. That's just really, really, really high, and we probably should nerf it as an example. But I think when you get characters like within some realm of balance, um, a lot of balance becomes about perception, right? So it's like, as an example, let's just do a thought experiment with all of you, okay? I'm gonna go by jungle. So hey everybody, we're gonna go by jungle. We're gonna look at some stats. Okay, first we're gonna sort by pick rate. Who on here should be nerfed based on these pick rates and win rates? Do you have any thoughts on it? This is only for solo queue. Let's like just ignore pro play for a bit, right? And the reason I'm asking this is that there's a lot of different possible takes for this, right? Like some of you might say, well, clearly Lee Sin should be nerfed because despite his win rate, he's the most popular jungle. And that probably means he's the most powerful jungle because he's so popular, right? That's maybe something you'd say. And another thing is like, let's say we thought jungle was overpowered, right? Honestly, one of the more effective ways of nerfing jungle, if jungle the role was overpowered, not saying it is, but these are hypotheticals, would be to nerf the most popular junglers because they're the ones you're most likely to see. So if you're running into Lee Sin and Nocturne and Viego every game, it's possible that if we nerfed all those guys down, jungle maybe feels less oppressive, right? Another thing you could say is like maybe we're supposed to nerf Briar here. She has a really high win rate and a really high ban rate. It's like actually both her and Nocturne. They have similar pick rates, they have 52% win rates, and their ban rates are 20%. Maybe that's players telling us it's like, whoa, those characters are actually pretty strong and they have some of the higher win rates, right? Maybe we're supposed to surf by win rate and be like, actually, we need to nerf Jungle Yorick. Jungle Yorick, highest win rate out there. His pick rate's non-existent, but he wins so much, like maybe we should nerf him, right? Maybe we're supposed to nerf Jungle Brand again, right? I'm just like giving hypotheticals here, but like the way I think about it is I think it's a lot of it, it's based on perception. It's like, it's kind of a thing where if we were to go tell you right now that we were nerfing Jungle Yorick, a lot of players would be like, what is Riot smoking, right? They'd be like, Jungle Yorick, that's not a thing. That's not that strong. Why does that matter, right? And so it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to nerf Jungle Yorick, even though Jungle Yorick's win rate might be this high. It's hard to tell because the sample size is so low. So like, I'm not sure it is actually that high, but it's like, something to think about. Similarly, it's like if I was going to say we're going to nerf Lee Sin because he's the most popular, I think some players might say, oh, that makes sense. But I actually think a lot of players would say, why are you nerfing Lee Sin? He doesn't win that much, and he's popular because he's fun, and people are just, trying to get good at him. Like, he doesn't that much of a problem. Whereas, like, that Briar champ, she just keeps running me down and eating me, and so you should nerf her, right? And I'm talking in circles, but what I'm getting at is just win rate, ban rate, pick rate. These are all things that you can use to like think about characters, but at the end of the day, the important thing is that the game feels balanced. I can tell you as much as I can just yell it, I can yap as much as I want about what true balance is, but if you're a league player and you don't feel like the game is balanced, that's where the game starts making you want to play it less and making you enjoy it less, right? So in that vein, to me, I think what we generally have to do is like characters who have really, really high agency or are really, really frustrating tend to need to be a bit weaker on average, because they tend to be more imbalanced feeling when playing against, whereas characters like lower agency who don't have as much outplay potential tend to need to be a bit stronger in terms of win rate on average to account for the fact that they're not going to be able to respond to every situation, and they tend to feel more balanced when you play against them. Now, that's a slippery slope though, because the far end of that thing of like balance things to feel fair is, what one of the most OP and fair feeling champions is? Or who has the potential to be? A champion with auras. This is old Janna, okay? So old Janna was, she had an aura that said, everybody on my team gets 3% move speed. That was a very, very powerful passive. And what would happen is you'd run a Janna on your team with a Jax top lane. Jax would have a little extra move speed, which would cause him to win the lane. He'd beat the crap out of you. And at the end of the game, what would your opponents do? They'd ban Jax, not Janna. despite the fact that the one making Jax OP was Janna. And that's because it's not really clear what Janna was doing, but it was very clear when Jax is bonking you on the head with his staff, right? And so a complexity about feel-based balance is there's also, you can go too far and you can get into a spot where basically all the characters who you don't notice are powerful are OP, and all the characters who feel powerful are underpowered. And that's probably also not a great take on your game, right? It's important that despite the fact that it's important that characters like Yasuo are viable, right? He's really fun to play. But if we like tuned Yasuo to the point where nobody said he was OP, he'd probably actually be incredibly weak, because Yasuo is one of those characters who tends to create strong feelings when you're playing against him, because he's a melee champion who runs in and stabs you to death, right? And so to me, like, my overall feeling on balance is that there's bounds for any given character of like how strong or how weak they should be, in terms of like actual win rates. And it's generally good to balance the game more towards it feels balanced versus it's objectively balanced. But again, considering that every character needs to be balanced within some bounds. And so, yes, I can buff Sona to 56% win rate, and she'd probably still feel balanced in a lot of cases, but that's probably unreasonable. So you always just want to be careful about going too far there. But yeah. And then, of course, none of this is even talking about pro play. Then you also have to talk about pro play. And pro play is interesting because pro play is the most aspirational version of the game. And so when you're balancing for pro play, you're not just balancing for pro play. You're actually balancing also for perception. Because when a character takes over pro play, the average player, despite the fact that they never even see that character or play that character, will start calling that character BS. Because they're looking at the best players in the game, and they're saying, whoa, the best players in the game can't deal with this character. Clearly it is broken, right? And in a lot of cases, that's true, right? And so pro play gets complicated because League of Legends is a competitive game, and so we want to make sure that at the highest level it is balanced. And there's some characters that when they take over pro play, like it's like even if they don't affect solo queue, they can still like create a feeling and a perception of extreme imbalance because, well, if the best players in the game can't deal with this, then like, is it actually fair? And a lot of times the answer is like probably no, it's not. So yeah, there's a lot of different complexities. Billion-dollar company, by the way. True. So yeah, basically it's really important to balance the game for all players of all different skill levels, and it's some combination of using statistics and data combined with design intuition of like what creates the best feeling game for, you know, the most players to play and enjoy. And that doesn't mean another thing too though is like sometimes people are like, oh, August, you said you wanted to create the best feeling game, then why'd you make Viego just murder me, right? That doesn't feel good, right? So another thing you have to remember about a game like League of Legends is that it's not always about having the best time every single game. League of Legends is a game that is about highs and lows, and that's actually good for League. That's a good thing. And I'm not saying we should just make characters frustrating, but I'm saying that like sometimes it's actually good to like triumph over a villain, right? Like you run into a Shaco and you actually beat the guy and you're like, haha, that was the worst time ever, but I got you, right? Like that feels really good. That's a good feeling moment that was preceded by a bad feeling moment, right? Sometimes you go 0-10 on Smolder, right? And you're like, this character is useless. I can't do anything. And then the next game, you get your stacks really early and you go 15-1. And you're like, this is the coolest character ever, right? Like those ups and downs, that variance of experience can be actually very, very, very good. And so a MOBA that promises you that every single game is going to be the most enjoyable thing you've ever experienced, I'd actually argue probably feels very flat and ends up being something you don't want to play over the long term. Playing a game for 1,000 hours, a lot of it is about variance and texture. And you should be having fun. It's very important that you have fun, but that doesn't mean that every single game needs to be max fun. Some games will be frustrating. Some games will challenge you and make you feel like your character sucks or this other character sucks. But the hope would be then you queue up again and you're like, well, this is what I'm going to do next time. And then next time your plan pays off and you just have a 15-1 Smolder game and you're like, I love dragons, right? Like, it just depends. A MOBA like that is called Hot Samo. I actually think this is one of the things that kind of hurt HOTS is I think HOTS they tried too much to even out the play experience. HOTS by getting rid of like say different gold and XP values, everybody in HOTS, for those you don't know, HOTS is Heroes of the Storm. All the characters, not characters, teams share levels in that game. So everybody is always the same level of power. And I think that ended up creating a much flatter experience than would have been good for like that game long term, because every game you're the same level of power on Vayne instead of having your 10-0 Vayne game and your 0-10 Vayne game. And so yeah, it's like I think HOTS is an example of they might have flattened out the experience a bit too much, and any given game is not going to be as frustrating because you're not going to get super far behind, but you're also not going to get super far ahead. And getting super far ahead is like I think one of the fun of MOBAs. Um, and yeah, so it's all about that balance.